Hello there and welcome to Global Business Africa. We'll be giving you insight into Africa's business and financial markets. I'm Uche Okoronkwo coming to you from Kenya's capital, Nairobi. Let's start with a look at the markets. Now, optimism returning to global markets today. Sentiment was boosted by stellar corporate earnings coming out of Wall Street. However, there's still some uncertainty as we see strong oil prices and stalling car sales in Europe remaining a reminder of headwinds for the world economy. Now, emerging market stocks hit a near three-week high today with the stock index up 1%, tracking those strong gains in Wall Street. Traders say they are set to add about 1.8% this week, their best gain since early September. Now, also coming up on the show today. China blasts off a three-person crew into its space station known as Tiangong or Heavenly Palace. Copper vandalism strangling the life out of South Africa's Eskom and Transnet. And a homeless man in South Africa uses his $20 cash grant as a capital to launch himself out of poverty. Well, tonight we start off in China.
9、8、7、6、5、4、3、2、1，点火。
Of course, the country has blasted off a three-person crew to its space station known as Tiangong or Heavenly Palace. The Long March 2F rocket has successfully delivered the Shenzhou 13 spacecraft to the due orbit. The Shenzhou 13 spacecraft took off early Saturday local time or 16:23 GMT. Now, the launch took place from the Jiaoqing Satellite Launch Center in northwest China. The three taikonauts involved are Zhai Zhijiang, Wang Yaping, and Ya Gongfu. Now, Wang is expected to become the first Chinese woman on China's space station and to conduct a spacewalk. They will stay for a record 6 months, the longest stint in space by China. This is 3 months longer than the crew of Shenzhou 12. China aims to complete the construction of Tiangong by the end of next year. Well, let's head back to the continent. In South Africa, the country's economic woes are now worsening due to the theft of massive amounts of copper from state firms Eskom and Transnet. Now, Eskom says it expects to make a net loss of $1.1 billion in its current financial year, adding that copper theft was costing it more than $400 million annually. This is besides the $135 million a year, which it uses to replace stolen cables. Now, Transnet Freight Rail adds that copper theft had climbed about 177% over the past 5 years and had risen particularly sharply during the COVID-19 pandemic. Hundreds of thousands of meters of cables were stolen in 2020, and much of this is smuggled overseas, costing the country millions of dollars a year. Now, U.S. President Joe Biden has announced that an additional 17 million coronavirus vaccines will be donated to the African Union. That's as he met with Kenyan President Uhuru Kenyatta on Thursday. The White House says the promised J&J shots are immediately available, with more expected by the end of the year to Kenya. The African Union has accused vaccine manufacturers of not giving its 55 member states fair access. Just about 4.5% of the continent's population has been fully inoculated, compared with more than 57% in the United States. The two leaders also discussed climate change and how to advance peace and security in the Horn of Africa.
Your country, you're doing a heck of a job. And now you are, Kenya is currently the president of the UN Security Council. I mean, thanks for letting us stay in. But all kidding aside, thank you. Thank you very much. And we're continuing our shared fight against COVID. The United States has donated 2.8 million doses of vaccine to Kenya as part of a 50 million doses we've donated to the African Union. And I'm proud to announce that today that we're making an additional historic one-time donation of 17 more million doses of J&J vaccine to the AU. And we're going to be sending some more by the end of the year to Kenya. And today we're going to discuss what more Kenya and the United States can do together on the Horn of Africa to advance peace and security. And we're also going to talk about strengthening the financial transparency and accelerating economic growth. You've spoken to that, Mr. President. I want to talk to you about that. And the fight against climate change.
We're also very closely partnering, especially in regard to the fight against terrorism globally. The United States has been a very strong partner to Kenya in that particular fight, and this is an area, again, I am hoping to have an opportunity to further discuss with the President. We are also keenly and very grateful with his strong position, especially with regard to climate change. This is an area where Kenya has made tremendous progress in her own right, and where we are firmly committed to the Paris Agreement, and we're glad to see the United States has now rejoined, and we look forward to working very closely together on that particular agenda, which, as you know, our country, our continent is the least in terms of emitting, but pays the highest price. So we welcome your leadership in this area, and I look forward to having the opportunity to discuss that further with you.
And heading to Nigeria now, the country's external debt stock is set to hit an all-time high of $45 billion. That's following the government's request to Parliament to approve fresh financing to fund its budget deficit. Well, as CGTN's Kelechi Emekalam now reports, authorities in Africa's largest economy, or topmost economy, are now seeking legislators' approval of a fresh external borrowing to the tune of $5 billion.
A total of nearly $5 billion in foreign loans. That's what Nigeria's government is seeking to borrow from the World Bank, French Development Agency and Exim Bank. President Muhammadu Buhari's request comes barely 2 months after Parliament approved an earlier request to borrow $8.3 billion and 490 million euros in loans. He says the funds are part of an initial borrowing plan for the 2018 to 2020 budget.
I personally think it is completely irresponsible to borrow for recurrent expenditure or to borrow for consumption, to borrow to fund the budget. When you look at the structure of the Nigerian budget, you will find out that in the 2020 budget, this current budget, the Nigerian government is using about 90% of its revenues, inflows, to what? To service loans. So it is actually a very negative and unproductive trajectory that the administration is leaning toward.
Nigeria is facing one of its toughest times after barely climbing out of a recession, its second in less than 5 years. The World Bank says the West African nation's revenue to GDP ratio fell to about 6% last year, making it the lowest in the world. Its revenue has seen 37% decline over the past 6 years and has been worsened by the pandemic-led downturn.
Nobody borrows against GDP. You actually borrow against your revenues. We're focusing more on spending, than creating, generating revenue. Nigeria is not generating as much revenue. And how do we generate revenue? That should be the conversation.
Nigeria's external debt profile has increased rapidly by 366% since 2015. The nation's total outstanding foreign debt was $9.7 billion before Buhari assumed office. By the end of March, the Debt Management Office posted an official foreign debt of $32.9 billion. If the latest request is approved, foreign borrowings in 2021 alone will total nearly $13 billion.
There's nothing wrong with borrowing, if we're building factories, if we're building human capacity, if we're building the hospitals, if we're building the educational system. We now have this huge cost of governance. Fund management is a problem because we spend, so much to maintain, the government, the people in government and the institutions.
Some experts warn that Nigeria's rising debt could scare away prospective foreign investors from the country if not checked.
This huge debt profile creates investor pessimism. And investor pessimism, it reduces the amount of foreign direct inflows that you have. And once you have all those uncertainties within the Nigerian economy, the Naira is unstable.
Government says the loans are meant for projects to help the nation realize its economic sustainability plan with focus across key sectors such as infrastructure, health, agriculture and food security, energy and COVID-19. Experts advise government to concentrate on its diversification agenda and build infrastructures to boost revenue and reduce borrowing. Kelechi Emekalam, CGTN Abuja, Nigeria.
Well, let's head to Tunisia now, where the financial sector's contribution to boost private investment rose 16.4% in 2020, and that's compared to 9.8% recorded the previous year. Now, according to Tunisia's Financial Market Council, the increase was driven by lending to the small and medium-sized enterprises and as well as venture capital sectors. CGTN's Adnan Shaushi has the latest on that data.
The Financial Market Council report noted the return of listings on the Tunis Stock Exchange with the entry of Assurance Malaria on the main market. The listing generated an additional market capitalization of $88 million. This was the first public offer at the Tunis Stock Exchange since 2018 and the unique IPO in 2020. The number of listed companies reached 80 in December 2020.
Despite the difficulties we faced last year, we introduced a new company, Assurance Malaria, with a capitalization of 88 million. The second positive indicator is that we've preserved foreign investment in spite of the pandemic in Tunisia.
The annual report also shed light on the strategy which was adopted to deal with the fallout of the COVID-19 pandemic on the national financial market.
2020 was the year of the global health crisis, which hit all sectors including the financial market. Yet Tunisia's financial market report showed resilience in the face of the crisis. We've ended the year with a moderate decline of around 3% of the level of the indicator. We ranked third in the Arab world in terms of annual performance.
The president of the Financial Market Council informed the head of state about new provisions to reinforce good governance requirements within listed companies.
I'm aware of how some corrupt individuals managed to enter and control the financial market in Tunisia at the end of the 1990s. This operation was made possible by some brokers in the stock exchange who specialized in theft and fraud. Now things have changed and we're determined to show the world that Tunisia is pushing for transparency and good governance in the financial market.
Financial analysts stressed the importance of the venture capital sector in terms of boosting the equity capital of SMEs and creating jobs in Tunisia. According to the Central Bank of Tunisia, venture capital investments helped create 8,000 direct jobs in 2020. According to the Financial Market Council, the Tunis Stock Exchange has not seen a massive withdrawal of foreign investors. Thus, the share of foreigners in the market capitalization recorded a slight increase compared to 2019 from 24.7 to 25.2%. Adnan Shawishi, CGTN, Tunis.
And now look at some corporate headlines today. A former chief test pilot for Boeing has been charged with allegedly deceiving U.S. regulators about the safety of the company's 737 MAX plane. Now, court documents say that Mark Faulkner provided the Federal Aviation Administration with false, inaccurate, and incomplete information about a new part of the flight control system for the aircraft. The alleged misleading information has been blamed for 2 fatal 737 MAX crashes in Indonesia and Ethiopia in 2018 and 2019. Now, if convicted, Mr. Faulkner could be jailed for up to 20 years. Meanwhile, 5 of the largest U.S. consumer banks have beaten quarterly earnings expectations this week. JP Morgan Chase, Citigroup, Wells Fargo, and Bank of America reported a combined profit of $28.7 billion for the third quarter. Investment banking giant Morgan Stanley crushed estimates, reporting a $3.58 billion profit. That's up nearly 38% compared to the same period last year. And Amazon has appealed a record $865 million penalty for allegedly violating the European Union's tough data protection rules. And this comes after the National Commission for Data Protection ruled that Amazon violated the bloc's General Data Protection Regulation, or GDPR, through the processing of users' personal data. The decision was triggered by a 2018 complaint from French privacy rights group La Quadrature du Net. And finally, an aviation expert says Italy's state-owned airline needs to run without political interference. And this comes after the government confirmed that the new carrier, Italia Trasporto Aereo, will start flying in place of bankrupt Alitalia on October 15th. That's after the government received approval from the European Commission to inject more than $1.5 billion into that airline. And that's a look at our corporate headlines. Well, let's head into a short break now, still coming up on the show. A local community in Kenya develops its own digital currency. And a Sweden-based music streamer, Spotify, turns to telcos to collect payments in Africa.
The world economy as we know it is about to change. Global business reports highlight emerging markets, developing countries, and dynamic sectors worldwide. We feature top analysts and newsmakers to provide perspectives on every facet of business. From an on-the-ground perspective, we provide you with balanced and objective assessments. Fast, sharp, and insightful. Global business, only on CGTN.
Every story starts out like this.
Okay. We'll head up now.
But beyond the rush of the numbers, there's always a more fundamental question. What happened? Who has been affected? When market-moving decisions are made, who's responsible? And why?
Let's get some reaction on ground. Joining us in Johannesburg is Sutra Nairobi. Hello, Nairobi.
This is how all stories begin. See how they end. Only on Global Business.
Welcome back, and let's go to Zimbabwe now. The country is negotiating new power supply deals with Zambia and Mozambique. That's as it tries to address a crippling power shortage that has led to rolling power cuts across the country.
According to Energy Minister Soda Jemu, a delegation from the Zimbabwe Electricity Supply Authority, ZESA, traveled to Zambia this week to try to negotiate a power import deal with indications that some 100 megawatts of excess electricity from Zambia's Kafue Gorge hydropower station could be secured. An additional 180 megawatts is being sought from Zambia, which could cut the current electricity shortfall to about 300 megawatts per day. Zimbabwe has been experiencing a power crisis due to reduced generation at the aging main thermal power station and the Kariba hydropower plant, where repairs to the dam wall are underway. The challenges are expected to ease when 2 new units that will generate a combined 300 megawatts of energy at the Hwange Thermal Power Station are commissioned in 2022. Farai Mwakutuya, CGTN, Harare, Zimbabwe.
And turning our attention now to the world of tech, a blockchain-based community currency is now providing a lifeline for hundreds of Kenyans in low-income neighborhoods as they battle through the coronavirus economic downturn. Now, Chainalysis Global Crypto Adoption Index 2021 has ranked Kenya the top country in the world in terms of peer-to-peer crypto trade, well ahead of the other 150 nations surveyed.
Kenya's capital, Nairobi, is sometimes described as a paradox with two diametrically opposite extremes. On the one hand, it's home to chic, upwardly mobile communities. On the other, some of those chic communities are sandwiched by some of the world's largest urban slums. Home to over 80,000 people, Mukuru Kayaba is one of the more populated slums in the Kenyan capital. In this low-income neighborhood, there's a new digital currency that's helping households stay afloat amid the COVID-19 crisis. It's called Sarafu, and the blockchain-based digital currency was created by non-profit organization Grassroots Economics in conjunction with the Kenya Red Cross.
What we found, especially in the informal settlements, that people who are daily wage earners, with the COVID restrictions, with lockdown, etc., they weren't earning their regular daily income that they were previously earning. And so their ability to access daily goods and services or to buy them really decreased. So community currency comes in to support that aspect.
There are currently about 100 businesses in the Mukuru Kayaba area that accept the community currency. Teresia's beauty salon is one of them and now takes us through how she uses the digital token.
I type *384*96, then OK. I'm going to be sending 1,700 Sarafu coins to this phone number. There you have it.
In 2020, Kenya surprised many by ranking first in peer-to-peer cryptocurrency trading. It ranked ahead of second place Venezuela and third place Nigeria, Africa's biggest economy, with 4 times Kenya's population. The increasing interest in digital tokens among Kenyans comes as the country's currency, the shilling, continues to weaken against major currencies.
The way you need to look at regulation is to break it down into good subsets. It's a type of users or market players that the regulation is affecting. So like first, I think most people are interested in retail. And retail is your standard peer-to-peer markets or exchanges. And as we saw in Nigeria, when the central banks technically banned Bitcoin, peer-to-peer markets went up 27% within a month. So they don't really care about the regulation, but that's where the users were moved away from exchanges towards them.
Authorities here, particularly the Central Bank of Kenya, have also been slow to adopt the use of cryptocurrencies, with unending discussions on developing regulations. This, however, does not seem to be stopping Kenya's growing appetite for cryptocurrencies. Najma Abdirizak, CGTN, Nairobi, Kenya.
And staying in Kenya, the country has successfully controlled its desert locust invasion. That's according to the Food and Agriculture Organization. Now, in 2019, Kenya experienced its worst invasion in 70 years. And the FAO said the East African nation was considered locust-free in late August 2021, as CGTN's Joy Kiruki Juma now tells us.
The desert locust invasion.
When the locust invasion came to this country, it was a menace. We would hear it all over the news, on the televisions.
The food security of thousands of people was at risk in the country. The pests devour the crops and pastures at a devastating speed.
When a family goes to the farm and what they had farmed has been eaten up by the desert locust. This means there is going to be hunger. Our children cannot go to school hungry.
The Kenya government was supported by the Food and Agriculture Organization to contain the locusts. Over 1,000 community scouts, environment, health and safety experts, agricultural officers and members of the National Youth Service were trained to stop the invasion.
We were trained on how to gather information on their behavior, on their movement, and how to even fight them.
The data NYS gathered was sent to the country's Desert Locust Information Service using FAO's handheld GPS-based data recording and transmission device. The device is designed for use in difficult and remote locations where monitoring and network is a challenge.
This was a very good experience. Since this desert locust menace came into our country, the National Youth Service has been in the forefront, and the delivery has been so well, because if the National Service didn't go outside there, the kind of destruction that we would have experienced would have been vast. Now, it was timely that we went outside there, and the delivery was, I can say, 100%.
Kenyan locals were also trained how to harvest locusts. The pests were milled for the production of animal feed and organic fertilizer. Through efforts like this, FAO and governments in East Africa say they saved some 4.4 million metric tons of cereals from destruction. Joy Kiruki Juma, CGTN.
Now, Africa, with its internationally recognized musical talent and its growing mobile phone use, is central to Swedish music streamer Spotify's plans to extend its reach to 1 billion customers. The efforts to collaborate with telecom companies are set to boost revenue and to help increase essential subscribers to the music platform.
As African artists are streamed across the world, the continent was seen as an obvious choice and is home to more than a third of Spotify's 85 new markets. The problem is payment on a continent where many people are more likely to have a mobile phone than a bank account.
One of the things that we did when we moved into Kenya was just to make sure that we were able to secure alternative payment methods. Some parts of Africa, a lot of African countries are unbanked, so that means they don't use credit cards. And this is very true of a lot of East Africa. In Kenya, you use M-Pesa for the most part. So we ensured to make sure that there was that facility so that the fans don't have so many barriers to access to music, which is something we should all be able to enjoy.
Most of us have access to our phones, but not most of us have cards and not most of us have bank accounts. So it's just important, since our phones are always with us, it's important to just make it easy for us to pay through our phones.
Owned by Kenya's biggest telecoms operator, Safaricom's M-Pesa is used to send money, save, borrow, and make payments for goods and services. Elsewhere in Africa, Spotify is seeking other collaborators.
I chose M-Pesa because it just goes direct, and then it won't cut. I have to put my PIN, so I have to, like, let's say, I have to authorize it. Yeah, because when you use M-Pesa, you have to give the authority for your money to be used, you know? So it's better like that. And it's cheaper when you use M-Pesa also.
Music producer Charles OTIENO says the streaming platform is helping artists like him to monitor streaming numbers and to see who's listening to their music.
You know, on Spotify we have Spotify for Artists. So we were not even able to access the Spotify for Artists because it wasn't in Kenya. So when it came to Kenya, now we can access Spotify for Artists. You can see the logs. You can see how your music is basically growing.
Spotify's local rivals, such as Kenya-based and Danish-listed Mdundo and Nigeria-headquartered Boomplay, have also started to build ties with mobile operators.
Spotify is continuing to ensure that we are having the right conversations with the right partners to ensure that we are providing solutions to payment problems that several African consumers face in different parts of the continent.
Such partnerships are based on telecom providers selling music bundles that give customers access to a streaming company's premium service and exclusively curated music mixes. Beryl Oro, CGTN.
You're watching Global Business Africa. Let's take a short break now, but still to come on the show. The IMF and World Bank push for more country-led efforts to counter climate change. And the 130th CANTON Fair in southern China's Guangzhou returns after missing last year due to the coronavirus pandemic.
This has taken me completely out of my depth, but at the same time it's exciting. It's new, it's different, it's a challenge.
It's really exciting.
Business in Africa is at a crossroads. We celebrate those who are adopting and thriving despite the challenges, from grassroots to big businesses.
Global Business
takes you along for the ride as we track the making of a giant.
Only on CGTN.
And now look at other headlines this hour. A British lawmaker from Prime Minister Boris Johnson's Conservative Party has been stabbed to death. David Ames, the Member of Parliament for South End West in Essex, Eastern England, was stabbed at a meeting with voters in a church. Now, Ames's office has confirmed the death, but given no further details. Police say they have arrested a 25-year-old man in connection with the incident. Meanwhile, the World Health Organization is reporting that after almost a decade of successfully tackling tuberculosis, cases of the infectious disease are on the rise again. This setback may potentially begin undoing years of progress towards eradicating the treatable disease. Consequently, the WHO is calling for increased efforts in terms of investment and innovation to save millions of lives. And a new study in Uganda claims that the parasite that causes malaria has developed resistance to the primary drug, which is used to treat the disease. While that remains a concern, the development of a malaria vaccine has experts optimistic. And still in Uganda, the World Food Programme has adjusted its approach to food assistance by increasing rations to the most vulnerable refugee communities. In the past, ration cuts have been equal across the board, disproportionately affecting the most vulnerable refugees. Now, Uganda has 1.4 million refugees, mostly from South Sudan and the Democratic Republic of Congo. And that's a recap of other headlines this hour. Now to some international news. A key committee of the International Monetary Fund says that the coronavirus pandemic has worsened global poverty and inequality. It is now urging for immediate action to achieve universal vaccinations. IMF Committee Chair Magdalena Andersson points to global crucial targets of vaccinating at least 40% of the population in all countries by the end of 2021 and, of course, 70% by mid-2022 as a key. Now, Andersson said although the global recovery continues, divergence between countries is still increasing.
Now, today we could conclude that the economic recovery continues, and at the same time, divergence between our countries is increasing. And there are two primary explanations: difference in access to vaccines and differences in policy space and support. And IMFC called for a strong international cooperation and immediate action to achieve universal vaccination. Therefore, we encourage the Multilateral Leaders Task Force to accelerate access to vaccines and to facilitate coordination among international partners. And this also includes mobilizing critical financing. Moreover, we agreed to take steps to reach the global goals, vaccinating at least 40% of the population in all countries by the end of 2021 and 70% by mid-22. And the pandemic has worsened poverty and inequalities globally.
Now, the IMF and the World Bank say they also want to see more country-led efforts to counter climate change. It is a central theme of their annual meetings happening just a few weeks before the COP26 UN Climate Summit kicks off. A wide range of high-profile speakers spoke on how countries and businesses should be acting and what the financial solutions should look like. Now, Caroline Malone reports on this from Washington.
Climate change is one of the defining challenges of our time, and making climate action count was the hot topic at the IMF World Bank meetings on Thursday. The impacts of climate change are already being felt around the world, with a rise in sea levels causing dangerous floods and storm surges putting large groups of people at risk. World climate leaders are pushing for more private sector financial support.
What we've been working on is getting the best of the private sector committed to net zero transition. Big banks, insurers, asset managers, asset owners. The number as we speak today is $90 trillion of balance sheet committed for that. And that's not for some distant date. It's near-term 5-year commitments, fair share of the 50% reduction by 2030. So now the challenge is, how do we marry that capital, that commitment, with where it's needed most, channel it to those emerging and developing economies.
US President Biden has announced plans for more alternative energy sources this week, approving the nation's first commercial offshore wind farm off the northeast coast. While on the west coast, cities like Los Angeles are well known for traffic contributing to transport emissions. There's a push to make California state carbon neutral by 2045.
People in central Vietnam went through
The effects of climate change are being felt more intensely in developing economies, especially those in extreme weather-hit regions.
There are many more people right now aware that, oh, it's climate change. But most of them would say, well, there's nothing much I can do about it.
Government and policymakers are looking at commitments to cap a rise in temperatures globally ahead of COP26. The IMF and World Bank participants agree that more needs to be done, especially amongst the largest economies, to prevent a catastrophic rise in temperatures. Caroline Malone, CGTN, Washington.
Now, the first part of the COP15 UN Biodiversity Conference has concluded in southwest China's Kunming. During the 5-day meeting, experts and country representatives gathered to review a post-2020 global biodiversity framework. They also agreed on a new set of goals for the next decade. Well, CGTN's Meng Qingchang reports.
It's the world's biggest gathering on biodiversity in a decade. The first part of the conference saw the adoption of the Kunming Declaration. It commits to securing an effective post-2020 global biodiversity framework, to reverse the current loss of biodiversity, and to ensure that biodiversity is put on a path to recovery by 2030. The ultimate goal is to fully achieve the 2050 vision of living in harmony with nature, adopted previously by the UN in Aichi, Japan.
The Aichi targets were developed over a number of years to help us bend that curve and to make us in a better place today. And yet the globe failed at every single one of them. However, there are important lessons we can take from that can help us have a more sustainable and better future.
The conference comes at a time when biodiversity continues to decline at unprecedented rates. Scientists say 1 million of the world's estimated 8.7 million species are at risk of extinction, and many natural services essential for own survival are falling apart. Time is running out for an agreement to save many plant and animal species, including our own. At the Leaders Summit, Chinese President Xi Jinping announced the 1.5 billion yuan Kunming Biodiversity Fund. It will be used to support biodiversity protection in developing countries.
Obviously, new money to help biodiversity conservation, particularly in developing countries who host the most important biodiversity. So some of the biggest rainforests and most important ecological areas are in developing countries, so they really do need that assistance.
President Xi also announced the first group of national parks, covering nearly 30% of the key terrestrial wildlife species found in the country. He said China will release implementation plans for peaking carbon emissions in key areas and sectors, and will put in place a 1+N policy framework for peaking emissions and achieving carbon neutrality. China's Minister of Ecology and Environment, Huang Runqiu, was elected president of the COP15 UN Convention on Biological Diversity.
I will do my part to uphold multilateralism and the principles of equity and justice, expand consensus among parties, and work towards a post-2020 biodiversity framework that is both ambitious and practical.
The conference also included a two-day forum on ecological civilization. It ended with an initiative called Building a Shared Community of Life on Earth and Protecting Global Biodiversity. Kunming will host the second part of the meeting in the form of a physical gathering in April and May of next year. Attendees are expected to adopt the post-2020 Global Biodiversity Framework. Meng Qingsheng, CGTN, Kunming, Yunnan Province.
And it was a packed venue on the first day of the 130th Canton Fair in southern China's Guangzhou. The event is welcoming exhibitors and buyers on site after 2 years, as last year's event was held online due to the COVID-19 pandemic. It is also the first time the Trade Expo is having both online and offline platforms working in tandem. Here's CGTN's Omar Khan with the latest.
With nearly 8,000 companies on site and nearly 30,000 online, the Canton Fair is back and in full swing. Let's check out what some buyers and exhibitors have to say about this year's event.
I'm extremely impressed. I'm impressed by the size of the fair. I'm impressed by the quality of the products.
Yes, it's great. It's really great. It's 2 years I wait for Canton Fair, and now I see it open. I'm really happy. I'm looking for goods here, and I need to buy some LED chips. I think I will find it here.
A lot of enthusiasm from visitors at this year's Canton Fair, which sprawls across a whopping 400,000 square meter venue. Though back up and running, the event will only last for 4 days, showcasing 16 product categories across 51 exhibition areas. But that hasn't fazed the buyers, exhibitors, and participants, as many of them are simply relishing in the reality of being able to return to face-to-face business.
I feel quite good. I feel so very passionate because you can see a lot of companies, different domestic and also from international. So it's quite good. It's like face-to-face, and you can see the products you're looking for. You can touch, you can feel. It's more easy for us when we are helping our clients to make the purchase.
That's arguably the biggest difference at this year's event. For the past 2 years, because of COVID-19, everything went online, taking away from any in-person interactions. Despite the Canton Fair allowing overseas participants to take part in this year's event, the process still comes with a lengthy 21-day quarantine. It's something not everyone can afford.
Yeah, first, I'm a broke agent. I run a company in Hong Kong and here in Guangzhou, so I'm helping the clients to make the purchase, inspection, and shipping from China. So basically, I will help them to go to the fairs to check the suppliers or the products, and because right now they could not travel. So That's what I'm doing for my clients to Latin country or for France and Spain.
In 2019, the fair generated just under $30 billion worth of trade deals. Realistically, it may take some time for the 65-year-old trade gathering to reach those numbers again, but the signs of a successful return are more than apparent. Omar Khan, CGTN, Guangzhou.
Now, there's a supply chain crisis around the world. In the UK, the Port of Felixstowe has run out of storage space for containers. That's amid a shortage of heavy goods vehicle drivers and a surge in imports ahead of Christmas. In California, there has been long-standing congestion, with container ships waiting weeks to offload. CGTN's Andrew Wilson reporting.
Britain, it seems, is not alone. The container jams like the one at Felixstowe Port are being seen around the world. In the UK, there are added domestic complications with HGV drivers and so on, but it's clear now that everyone is wrestling with a global supply chain crisis.
I want to take a moment to reflect on the work that we started.
In Washington, G7 finance ministers wrapped up proceedings in agreement that they faced a global challenge that was best tackled together.
Well, I tell people to be reassured that we're doing absolutely everything we can to mitigate some of these challenges. They are global in nature, so we can't fix every single problem, but I feel confident that there'll be good provision of goods for everybody, and we are working our way to remove blockages where we can.
The headline crisis is perhaps the long-standing congestion in California, where an armada of container ships lies idle, waiting weeks to offload in Los Angeles and Long Beach. The White House has now announced a new 24/7 shift pattern to tackle it, with a clear presidential call to national transportation networks to step up as well.
The rest of the world is closing in, and we risk losing our edge if we don't step up. In order to be globally competitive, we need to improve our capacity to make things here in America, while also moving finished products across the country and around the world. We need to think big and bold.
Shipping costs are 5 times what they were last year. In the UK, the lack of truck drivers is biting hard, and analysts are still predicting a difficult winter. Global or not, the government is choosing to remain buoyant in public.
Well, the situation is improving. I'm confident that people will be able to get their toys for Christmas. As I say, I quite understand why people are concerned by these headlines, but we are working through these challenges as we have worked through other challenges.
But there's no doubt that the pandemic has unearthed some extraordinary weaknesses in how the world does business, and collateral damage in some sectors will be unavoidable. Andrew Wilson, CGTN.
And moving on now, European startups are showcasing their latest gadgets in Amsterdam ahead of this year's Consumer Electronics Show. Now, the event is scheduled to be held in Las Vegas in early January. A relaxation virtual reality app, an electronic scooter, and a medical backpack. Those are just a few of the gadgets on display this year. Hosted by the Consumer Technology Association, more than 1,100 companies from across the globe will showcase the latest in digital health, food tech, automotive tech, NFTs, gaming, and smartphone systems.
We do a lot of research within psychiatry, so people who are anxious, who have a depression, etc. That's one part of the many scientific research we do. And these patients are helped with VRelax because relaxation is very hard for them. So this is the part of research we do. We do also a lot of research within companies where employees have a lot of stress because of different situations.
It's not only an infusion pump in a backpack, it's also a very smart infusion pump. It lets nurses make a plan for the day and combine different infusion fluids and program it in advance. So it's actually a pump with a big brain designed to improve the workflow in the hospital.
We created a new electric moped and we made the design logical. So what you see here on the moped is that we don't have a gas tank, but instead we have a battery box. And in this battery box you have room for 2 battery packs. And this makes the point of gravity very low, which gives you a better riding experience.
And on that note, let's take a look at commodity markets today. Oil prices hitting a fresh 3-year high, climbing above $85 a barrel on forecasts of a supply deficit over the next few months in the market. That is as rocketing gas and coal prices stoke a switch to oil products. Meanwhile, gold was set for its best week in more than 5 months as a retreat in the US dollar and, of course, Treasury yields lifted the metal's appeal, and that's despite a looming US Fed tapering cycle. Let's take a short break now, but still coming up on the show. We look at the homeless man in South Africa who used his $20 cash grant to start a business.
Africa is a continent of diversity, with varied climates and enchanting geography, and a people so distinct, but with a shared enduring spirit. We are at the heart of the continent to bring you the untold stories.
Let's have a look.
We celebrate Africa as it shapes its own destiny.
Tunis,
Syria,
Juba,
Johannesburg,
Ethiopia, Tanzania.
Africa Live. Find your voice.
You don't find the stories of North Africa by sitting on the sidelines. No one else will take you where we can in North Africa. And no one else will show you what it's all about. CGTN, see the difference.
Well, let's go to South Africa now, where a homeless man has turned a $20 COVID-19 cash grant from the government into his catapult out of poverty. With it, he started a business. Now, Lionel Ngwenda was one of more than 6 million to qualify for the monthly grant between March 2020 and April 2021. It was made available for those who were unemployed or without any source of income. Here's CGTN's Julie Shire with his story.
Hi, I'm Lionel Ngwenda. I am the founder of Amatrima Mzansi. This is the place where I live. This is a homeless shelter that was erected during the lockdown.
Lionel Ngwenda lost his job as a barman and had no home when South Africa went into a hard lockdown last March.
I felt very bad. I felt very sad. I thought there was no hope after it, but I had to sit down and make up my mind again. Do I just want to sit down and cry or make something good out of it?
Ngwenda applied for a monthly $20 COVID relief grant and used it to make bags.
Firstly, I didn't even make use of 1 cent from it. I went and purchased all the materials from it. And then after that, that's when I started sewing. When I sell 1 bag, I might buy material to produce 2 bags. I sell again 1 bag, purchase now materials for 4 bags.
His business, Amadreamer Mzansi, is now flourishing. He's moved into the Africrafters market at Ushaka Marine World, one of Durban's top tourist spots.
I design all my bags, I make the patterns, I customize it, it's everything, I do it from scratch. At first, when I make 1 bag, it takes me 3 days because of the designing, the calculation, the pattern and all. But after that, I can make 2 bags to 3 bags a day.
Ngwenda is making plans to move out of the shelter as orders pick up.
I think it's a very good investment because I planned not to go back anymore and put a CV in the job. This business, I want it to end up in a factory, to have machineries, about 50 to 100 inside, with a lot of employees.
Lionel is one of 6 million people to get the special relief grant during the first 12 months of the lockdown. It ended in April this year, despite unemployment rates shooting up to a record 35%. Julie Shara, CGTN, Cape Town, South Africa.
And in Tanzania, one eco-conscious entrepreneur has now found an innovative approach towards waste management. He is recycling waste human hair to produce fertilizer, pesticide, and fiber for reinforcing material in concrete. CGTN's Daniel Kijo has the story from Arusha.
He's been called a madman, a wizard, and even worse. But David Dennis is a simple entrepreneur who goes door to door collecting what's left over from haircuts. Human hair waste is the most important ingredient for his cut-off recycling company. It started 4 years ago when David Dennis was still in secondary school. He was concerned about waste management issues caused by a local dump site, and that gave him an idea for a school science fair project using what he had learned in chemistry class. His project won second place overall.
Recycle is an eco-venture where we innovatively take part in waste management, that is through human waste hair recyclers.
David pays more than 100 young people each month to help him collect as many as 8,000 kilos of human waste. Rock City Barbershop in Arusha is one of the hair pickup points. At first, this barber says he thought David must be using the human hair waste for black magic. But now, Nixon Hayuma says he sees it's all for a good purpose.
We now separate hair and other trash, so the project is helping even us keep our barbershop clean.
David has agreements to do weekly hair waste collection from over 20 barbershops.
This man's trash is treasure for David and his team. It is in barbershops like these all over Arusha region that David gets the precious raw material for his fertilizer.
Then he sorts the hair, uses water and acetone to remove microorganisms, and then he heats it up to break up the protein in the hair. He then uses potassium hydroxide to further break the hair down for 20 minutes. After that, it settles for one night before packing it ready for sale. Local farmers around Arusha are buying 1 bottle of cut-off recycled liquid fertilizer for $1 each. Vegetable farmer Fabian Wilson says the fertilizer provides a mixture of elements for plant growth with a high amount of nitrogen than other commercial fertilizers. He says the fertilizers helped increase his yields by 40%, all from unwanted hair.
We usually throw it away. It usually has no other uses once cut. But after hearing that what I consider trash is used in agriculture, it was hard to believe.
Cut-off Recycle's team is now in the process of scaling up to reach more farmers in Arusha and beyond. This way, they say they will make more fertilizer to improve the lives of farmers and those who depend on their crops, while keeping the environment clean. Daniel Kijo, CGTN, Arusha.
Well, before leaving you today, let's take a quick look at Africa's currencies. Now, most emerging market currencies were up today. South Africa's rand led those gains with an 0.6% jump. Of course, the rand was the best performer in emerging markets this week. It has a relatively higher yield than its emerging market peers. And of course, the rand tends to show large gains when sentiment improves across the board. And that's it for this edition of Global Business Africa. Remember, you can send your feedback to the contacts on your screen. You can also follow us on our various digital media platforms. From me, Uche Okoronkwo, and the rest of the team, thanks for watching.